Yes, so hello everyone. Thanks for coming. So today we have two presenters, Shahzad Sharahimov. He works at the Tashkent Medical Academy, and Ulugh Nur Muhammedov, I think our friend. I'm sure you all know him. He works at the Northeastern Illinois University. He's assistant professor there. So the topic they're going to talk about is 5 test formats to assess productive vocabulary. So please do not unmute yourselves. If you want to speak, raise your hands. Okay, thank you, and we'll over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Nadrapa, and thank you so much for all coming. So I know it's Friday, so in English, right, probably you guys have all heard this phrase called TGIF, which basically stands for thank God it's Friday, because you guys might know that Saturday and Sunday is day offs in the United States and in Canada too, probably, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But I think nowadays it doesn't matter which day is it. It's all the same.
Every day is a weekend, yes. So thanks again for joining us. Erkin Eke was briefly mentioning that, you know, there are lots of presentations today from Cambridge, Macmillan, and Pearson. So thanks again for choosing Mentor Hub. And, you know, Shahzad and I would like to express our gratitude to Nadrapa, who has been maintaining and guiding the Mentor Hub, for uniting us all, you know, in a sense, like, you know, we have, right, language teachers from South Korea, Canada, United States, in Uzbekistan predominantly, and we are all being united under one Mentor Hub. So Nadrapa, special thanks to you for arranging this during this pandemic era. So Shahzad and I would like to talk about assessment today, and so specifically, you know, how to assess productive vocabulary, because what we've noticed is that, you know, over the past 2 weeks, there were a couple of wonderful presentations on assessment, one by Erkin Eke, right, from Westminster University in Tashkent, and another one by Oybek Eke on assessment as well. So we thought maybe let's also talk about assessment, but also extend it a little bit to the, you know, productive vocabulary. So Shahzad, are you here?
Yes, I'm.
Yeah, okay, good. Some of you might be wondering why these two gentlemen are doing here. Well, first of all, I feel like we have to bring more male instructors into the field.
That's,
you know, otherwise
right.
It's like
yes.
full of women, you know.
I know. So yeah, that's really good. Yes.
So that's one thing. And second of all, I've known Shahzad for a long time, so we actually, you know, worked on a paper on this field. So we decided to share this with our colleagues in Uzbekistan. So this is a brief agenda for our talk today. You know, we just want to talk about purpose of assessment and what does it mean to know a word, and we'll specifically focus on productive vocabulary, and we'll try to define productive vocabulary a bit later. So now here's the thing, right? Vocabulary is a very complex phenomena. Whether, you know, your native language is Uzbek or Russian and English, it doesn't really matter, right? Vocabulary is very complex and it's multifaceted, which basically means you have to know all sorts of different things in order to master a word, right? So if you look at this, like, imagine a learner who just started learning, you know, foreign language, right? Now let's look at it. Shout, right, written in small letters. Next one is shout, written in capital letters, right? And, you know, this is the same, and this is bolded, right? And just imagine how learners would view this, right? Would the learners would view them as one single word, or will they view them as, you know, 4 different words, right? So, or the next one, save, saves, saving, saved, right? These are different forms of the same word, but they're different, right? Because, you know, there is some, you know, the inflections are different here, right? Even though it's the same verb. Now, how about this one? Product, production, productive, productivity, right? This is word families, right? They're all related to the word product, but as the word families change, the meaning might also change, right? So that's why vocabulary is really tricky. That's why it's multifaceted. Or the, you know, number 4, the word see, right? Dengiz, right? But there is also a word season. There is a word seal. There is a word surge, and another word search, right? I mean, as you can see, right, all of these words have the 3 letters C. Will it confuse the learners or not? Will learners think that they are all related words or not, right? anyway, so whether it's Uzbek, English, or Russian, whatever language you speak, vocabulary is multifaceted. Like you cannot just define it with single terms, right? It's very complex. So that's what we are trying to show in slide number 3. And just to let you know that this was taken from Reed 2013. And John Reed is a very famous researcher in the area of vocabulary assessment. So if you're interested in vocabulary assessment, John Reed, so you can Google his name, and he's published a lot in this area. Now I would like to hand over to Shazas, who will talk about the types and purposes of assessment. Shazas, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Here we are going to talk about the types and purposes of assessment. And here, as you know, there are lots of types of tests and assessments. And here we just listed 3 of them, which are achievement tests, diagnostic tests, and placement tests. So I'm sorry. Here we have very important terms to know. So what is the achievement test? The achievement test just determines whether course objectives have been met, or appropriate knowledge and skills acquired by the end of a given period of instruction. Placement test places a student at a particular level of section of just language or curriculum or school or just program, which includes items, materials covered in various courses in a curriculum. And the last one, diagnostic test, it diagnoses aspects of a language that a student needs to develop. Diagnostic tests should elicit information on what students need to work on in their future.
So, thank you so much, Shazas.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Shazas. So one of the reasons we're talking about these terms is that because it all depends, right? Why unit assessment? Why do you want to assess vocabulary knowledge, right? Do you want to use it? I mean, developing a test can be an easy task for you, right? You can just get a piece of paper and you can develop it, or on your Microsoft Word. But it also depends why you want to assess the students' vocabulary skills, right? Do you want to use it for achievement test purposes, or placement test, or diagnostic test, right? If it's the beginning of the semester, you know, do you want to assess it, you know, for which of the purposes? So you really have to define your purpose when you assess students' vocabulary knowledge. Now, here's the thing. We briefly mentioned, right, vocabulary is multifaceted. So probably some of you might have seen this chart. This chart was initially developed by Paul Nation. And whether you teach vocabulary, or you research vocabulary, or you're interested in vocabulary, you must know this chart, okay? Why? Because somehow this chart encapsulates all the important features of second language vocabulary learning. For example, as you can see on the left side, you see form, meaning, and use, right? Now, form includes spoken, written, and word parts, right? I mean, if you want to learn a new word, right, you have to know how the word looks like, right? What's the spelling? You also need to know how it sounds like, right? Like, you know, for example, cell phone, right? So you have to know how it's spelled, right? C-E-L-L-P-H-O-N-E, right? And when I see this word, I have to be able to recognize this word as a learner. Also, when I hear this word, I have to be able to recognize the meaning of the word, right? So, and which goes to the next one, meaning. So we have to know the form meaning association, which basically means if I say glasses, right? If I hear the word glasses, I have to be able to know in my mind what glasses is, right? And how it's spelled. So it's a form meaning association, and which is very important at the initial stage of vocabulary learning. And the last but not least, it's called use, right? So we might know lots of words, but do we know how to use them in our speech or writing, right? So that's where the use component includes. And as you can see, you will see R and P and R and P and R and P. R stands for receptive knowledge, right? So when you listen and read, are you able to recognize? While P stands for productive knowledge, right? So as a learner, if I know the word cell phone when I see it in a text, when I want to say that word, I should be able to say cell phone, right? So in other words, it's a production. And the same applies here, and the same applies here. Or, you know, I just want to also talk about it, constraints on the use, right? Look at it. When, where, and how often would you expect to meet this word, right? In other words, vocabulary is very complex. And today we'll just deal with the productive nature of vocabulary. So look at it, right? In order to know one word, we have to know its pronunciation, its spelling, right? Parts of speech, synonyms, antonyms, morphology, level of formality, words meaning, collocation, syntaxis, properties, right? Formulaic language and proverbs, right? So, I mean, one quick example about the syntactic properties that, like, you might know the word interest, right? Interest, qiziqish, right, in Uzbek. So, but if you want to use a collocation, you have an interest in something, right? Or you are interested in something, right? So grammar is already changed because of the word, right? Or you can also say, I'm interested in reading Harry Potter, for example, right? Or I'm interested in Harry Potter, right? I'm interested in politics. I have a huge interest in vocabulary, for example, right? As you can see, vocabulary is very complex, and it involves so many different layers. Well, in addition to that, we have to know a lot of words, right? There is a famous quote by Eli Hinkle who says, vocabulary is one of those things where the rich get richer, right? As you can see from this, which was taken from BBC, as an educated adult, we're supposed to know around 15,000 word families or words, right? If you have a degree, let's say from an English-speaking country, especially PhD, you're expected to know, or you are expected to know about around 23,000 words, right? While if you're a kid, then, if you're a 5-year-old kid, then you have to be able to recognize 5,000 words. Or if you're a 2-year-old kid, you have to be able to recognize around 300 words. And it depends from family to family. But what I'm trying to show from this video is that vocabulary is very complex. On top of remembering or learning so many words, you also have to know their collocates, their meanings, their associations, their grammar patterns and everything. So that's what we are trying to show in this presentation. Now, here's the thing. Can you guys recognize these faces? Yeah? Do you guys know who they are?
I know the woman here.
Good.
I guess she's a journalist.
You are right.
She lives in journalist, the woman.
You are right. You're absolutely right. Yeah,
she lives in Washington D.C. if I'm not mistaken.
You are right. You are right. No, how about this gentleman? How about this gentleman?
Voice of America.
He is
Sherzod.
Qudrat
Something. Yeah, Qudrat Khojaev. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
How about this gentleman? How about this gentleman?
We don't know him. We don't know.
Eldor Hassan. So one of the reasons I'm showing it to you guys is that for me, they're all speakers of Uzbek language, right? Sherzod Qudrat Khojaev, Navbahari Mamova, Eldor Hassan. So they, whenever they write, whenever they talk, they have beautiful Uzbek. Like, for example, I know all of the words that they use, but I'm not as eloquent as they are. You got it? So that's what it shows, the productive vocabulary. Maybe you and I are all good at reading, are good at listening to news, good at reading books in Uzbek, but maybe our productive vocabulary is not as rich as theirs, or is not as fluent as theirs. So as you can see, receptive vocabulary is when you understand, when you hear the words or read them, while productive words that you use to express yourself in speech and writing, okay? Like, for example, The Economist, Psychology Today, Shazes and I feel comfortable reading these news. However, we are not really good at producing the words that they're using in their texts. So that's why receptive vocabulary, you might have a lot of receptive vocabulary. You might know 10,000 words, but it doesn't mean that you'll be able to express them right away fluently in your speech, okay? Now, we will introduce you guys 5 test formats for vocabulary use. We'll give you examples. We'll also try to discuss their usefulness in terms of practicality, validity, and washback. So Shazes is going to explain these terms to you guys. Shazes?
Thank you very much. So let's first of all give the definition to validity. So validity is the extent to which inferences made from assessment results are appropriate, meaningful, and useful in terms of the purpose of assessment, right? So validity is the most important issue in selecting a test, right? So validity, in other words, we can say that it really refers to what characteristic the test measures and how well the test measures that characteristic. We can also give the definition made by Bailey and Curtis. According to them, the validity is the extent to which a test measures what it's supposed to measure. For example, let's say if a student gets a high score in a vocabulary quiz at the end of a course, we can infer that a high score indicates good knowledge of the words that have been taught in that unit. A valid test also measures exactly what it's supposed to measure. Okay, it also doesn't measure irrelevant variables, and also it offers useful, meaningful information about the students or just test takers' abilities. Next slide, please. Here we have an excellent picture and a quote from Albert Einstein. You can read it.
So can I make a quick addition? So
Yes, please.
No, never mind. So shall we go to the next slide?
Okay.
Go ahead, Charles.
So here we are going to talk about the production recognition. Here is we have item 1. So we have a sentence with multiple choice, right? So a student has to choose one of the correct answer. And so here we have just one question to our participants. What do you think in this sentence, students are producing, or just is it recognition? What do you think? Are they producing something, or?
First one is recognition, maybe.
Can I answer for this one?
Yes, please.
When we go on vacation, I want, so here the learner, while we are giving them an order to provide with the validity, the first they try to use this lexical meaning of these words, or semantic, here semantic field, whether these words goes here or not, by reading the following part of the sentence.
Good. So here the students do not produce anything, right?
Yes.
They are just recognizing just by looking at the form. That's it, right? So okay, thank you. So in item 2, we have some also kind of question. Here is also, like, for example, you can read rather of your mother or father, right? So they're also, do you think, producing or recognizing?
Second one is cost for the production.
Producing.
Yeah.
Producing.
Why do you think they are producing?
Because here they will choose the options here. You spend, lost,
Just choosing options.
Here you should include some information about your family members and something else.
Good.
So it's
Good.
production.
Thank you. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Well, just a quick thing, Charles, I would like to point out. In item 2, it's not production, it's still recognition. Because please note, right? So students here, they have options, right? And here they have definitions. So they have to choose the right definition for the words. Like, for example, brother of your mother or father. So they have to select uncle. Or middle, they have to select center, right? In other words, the words have already been given to the students, right? So they're not producing anything. They're just, as long as they're able to recognize the words and their meanings, they should be able to select the correct answer. So both of the examples that Charles shows, they're actually assessing these item formats, assessing students' recognition skills. Okay, these are not productions. Charles, go ahead.
Thank you. So here we have practicality. So practicality refers just to administrative issues, you know, for example, like including costs, the amount of time, or how the time it takes to construct, or in other words, according to Bachman and Palmer, a test should be easy to design, easy to administer, easy to grade, and easy to interpret the obtained results. Right?
Yes.
So that's my just favorite note over there. You can look. So washback, let's just give a definition to washback. So it refers to the influence important tests have on classroom practices. So in particular, in other words, we can say that their effects, the effects they have on teaching and learning. Here you can see just just a paper with notes made. So it's very interesting. Can you guess whose notes might be?
Whose
I would
paper?
say he's a very famous person.
This paper is one of the president's speech.
President's speech, right?
Can you guess which president it was?
He tried to make some corrections before he made a speech.
This is Barack Obama, if I'm not mistaken, president of previous president.
Exactly,
Yeah.
he is. So you can just look at his, notes and say, wow, even the Barack Obama, the U.S. president,
Yeah. So
Yes.
one of the
makes so many changes in his notes before he makes his speech.
yes. So one of the reasons we decided to put it in the washback slide is that so imagine you are a teacher and you have a student named Barack Obama, and imagine you gave so many comments to your student, right? After you give comments on the student's paper, what would you do? Imagine you give comments and you graded the student's paper. Would you talk to a student face-to-face and explain your comments? Or will you just give these comments to the students and just walk away and be done with it, right? So that's washback. Like, in other words, the effect of testing on teaching. After you give a test, would you spend some time with your students to talk about the students' performance in the test? Or will you just, give grades to students and just move on to the next lesson plan? So the washback is very important, and I think, especially we should give a time for students to review. So that's what washback is about. So, Charles?
Yes. Yeah. Also, just a little comment. Even the washback may be also a negative, right? As you said.
Yes. Go ahead. Can you tell us about it? What do you mean by negative washback?
No, I mean, sometimes, as you earlier said, that sometimes you give just, feedback to our students, and most of the time, because of the number of students we have, sometimes it's just unfeasible, to just talk to them, or sometimes, because of our things we have to do. Mm-hmm. So that's why, that's why washback is very important, right? So when you when you don't work with the student, mm-hmm. he also probably loses his confidence, So when we have a negative washback, so we have to try to get that not negative one.
You're right. Positive. The positive. You are absolutely right. Thank you so much for adding it. Yes. So we should, as teachers, we have to strive for positive washback, so that after we give students tests back to them, we spend some time, right, on why we gave a specific point or mark or grade, and why we commented in such a way, so that students are able to integrate some of our feedback into their learning. Thank you. So Charles has talked about validity and practicality and washback, so which all related to test usefulness, right? So now, Charles, you want to continue? Now, format for one. So we'll introduce the 5 test formats one by one, and we'll also look at these test formats from the practicality, from validity, and also from washback perspectives. Charles, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So in format 1, it's gap filling, or we can also say closed test. Here we have 2 sentences with answer key. So in these test formats, students are presented sentences and asked to fill in blanks with correct words or just phrases. And which I also want to mention that this test requires them to write, right?
Yeah, right. Yes.
So here, so here the expectation is that learners are asked to write a quote word in the blank. Although it sounds, maybe it sounds to you this format as a simple test format, but the sentence should be chosen carefully. So if you noted that several answers, or we can say word options, may be written in a sentence. For example, A and B, right? Possible answer choices for A include arrive at, come to, make, while the following options possible for B, right? So you can move to the next slide.
Okay, sorry, I moved it too soon.
Okay, that's okay. If teachers want to elicit words that were previously taught in class, they might want to present sentences that have a limited context so that only one answer is correct. For example, let's say in example C, right? So it says to stay awake, they drank several cups of strong coffee, even though we can, students might use like a black coffee. And
can I add something? So, like for example, number B, right? So I went to borrow a book from the, right? I mean, a couple of options are possible, right? So library, teacher, librarian, and shelf. But we also have to be careful how we, how we score the students' works, right? So what if a student makes a spelling mistake, right? What if a student chooses a totally different word, right? So, and that's why productive vocabulary, or assessing productive vocabulary, can be very tricky, right? So, Charles, go ahead.
Thank you. So, for example, if you say here, in scoring, for each correct answer, the student gets 1, and for incorrect answer, gets 0. So here, I would like to ask you again one question. What do you think if he, in our sentence B, if the students just writes library in I instead of Y, should we consider it as a correct answer or not? Because of his spelling mistake. No, all right.
No, maybe some people are pointing out in chat. Oh, they said no. Okay.
They're saying no.
Yeah. Tohar Ahmedov mistake. Zeba no. Shahnahan no. Soraya no. Nilufar no. Correct. Yeah. What do you think, Charles?
Probably a student should be half a score. What do you think?
0.5.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the student is still getting, just recognizing it.
Exactly. Or let's put it that way, right? We are able to, as a teacher, we are able to recognize that, right? It's better than, let's say, lobar, right? I mean, I want to borrow a book from the lobar, right? I mean, if there is the lobar, then it doesn't make sense. Or from libro, for example, right? If somebody is learning the, Spanish and said libro, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, Alisher also said it. For me, it's okay. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it also depends. Like, for example, Alisher, would you give the whole point, like a full point? Like, even though there is a spelling mistake? Yeah, so Tohar Ahmedov wrote Charles,
Kattık.
Exactly, so the meaning might change. So Charles, you can yeah, it's actually great.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
So here, let's talk about the usefulness of this test format. Okay. So gap filling, just we can target the words from our textbooks and the syllabi, or teacher feedback textbook content for a quick review. It's also easy to create. You can use example sentence from the dictionaries or your students' textbooks, which you use in your classes. And it's also easy to score if context-dependent sentences are listed. Oh, and also this test format is authentic, easy to administer, and may produce positive washback.
Yeah.
It's authentic because learners are asked to write appropriate words in blanks. most likely using words from their unit chapters in the classroom context, or most importantly, those previously learned words should be used in a sentence. Therefore, context plays an important role here.
Mhm.
And also, in order to create items for a test, teachers can extract example sentences from their course textbooks again, or just from the online dictionaries also.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
it's just free and very useful, handy.
Handy
use.
dandy. So next one.
Handy dandy, right? So our next format is vocabulary knowledge scale, or we can also put VKS, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in this test format, the students or learners are asked to demonstrate how well they know a given words, or just a given word or words. And this test format originally was proposed by Paribart and Boucher. Probably Nodrapa knows them.
Because they're based in Canada, not Rafa.
Yes,
Oh
exactly.
no, sorry, I didn't see them in the shops, right? No, never came
So
across.
this test format has been used in many research projects, which examined English language learners' depth of vocabulary knowledge. So here we have, there are 3 parts in each item here, right? So the word that's being tested is toil. And the learner is required to demonstrate his or her knowledge of toil by filling in the blanks. So in the first part, the learner is presented with the saying that I don't know what the word means, right? So if the learner circles the first part, then the learner doesn't need to complete the second part 2 and 3, because it's he or she says he or she doesn't know it. So if the learner knows the meaning of the word, then they should provide an English synonym or translation in their own native languages, right? So if the learner knows the meaning of the word, and she's or he is asked to move to part 3. So in part 3, they are also asked to use that given word in an example.
Yeah, which is written here, right? So okay.
So the learner has to indicate, how well they know the target word. When it comes to scoring, learners' knowledge is evaluated on a scale of 1 to 3. So in part 2, if they provide a synonym of translation, they get 1 point. And if they also use the word in a sentence, in part 3, they also get additional 1 point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ulubek, if you have any comments?
No, I don't have any comments. No.
Good.
Shall we go to?
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the usefulness of VKS. So VKS can be used for diagnostic purposes at the beginning of the program or unit. And it's also easy to create items in this format. Moreover, it informs teachers about the learner's depth of word knowledge. And scoring can be tricky here in number 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, next slide, please, a little bit. Why scoring can be tricky in number 3?
Oh, I was supposed to add an example here, and I forgot, Charles.
Okay, that's fine. Don't worry.
I forgot it.
Be happy.
So,
Okay.
Yeah. No, okay. My apologies, guys. So, one of the reasons, right? Because as you can see, with any productive vocabulary, as you can see, right? Like spelling issue can be problematic, right? Grammar issue can be problematic, right? Or students might write down a sentence, but the sentence might not make any sense to you, right? So that's why here we actually wanted to show an example, but I totally forgot to write one example. So due to grammar issues, accuracy issues, and meaning might be incoherent. So that's why grading student or assessing students' productive vocabulary can be tricky. So, and I think Charles and I've been also trying to come to conclusion by saying that maybe this is the relationship between you and the student, right? Maybe let's say if a student makes a spelling mistake, as long as a teacher you're able to recognize the word, maybe that's okay to give the student full point. But if you are like, no, the meaning changed even with one letter, as one of our attendees said, like qattiq and qattiq in Uzbek, right? So maybe no, it's not okay, right? Even for a spelling mistake, a student needs to be penalized. So that's why these are some of the things you really have to discuss with your students, and you have to make a honest decision based on your experience in your particular context. Charles, you want to add something?
Yes, and sometimes when we say tricky, it really depends, as you said, have to decide which sentence is strong one and which sentence is weak one.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends on the relations, as I mentioned, between a teacher and a student, right?
Exactly, and how you really want to do it. Like, for example, if you give it as a, let's say, formative assessment, right? Maybe this is a perfect opportunity for students to focus on the meaning of the words. Maybe it's okay to make a spelling mistake. But if you're using it as a, let's say as an achievement test, right? Because usually achievement tests are given at the end of the unit, right? Or at the end of the semester. Maybe where basically by the end of the semester, students will have multiple opportunities to practice the word or to learn more about the words. Then maybe spelling mistake should be penalized in the achievement test, while in diagnostic assessment, not really, or during the formative assessment trials, not really, right? So it really depends, and it's really up to you. I mean, teaching is not a science, teaching is art, right? So it's up to you. Okay.
So here also teachers can formulate their own way of scoring to make this course informative and meaningful. And also we can say, if it takes too much time, fill in the blanks, and the handwriting of a student is not legible, teachers can also elicit students' knowledge by interviewing learners to ensure that they have learned assigned vocabulary from a unit, right?
Yes, which is a very good example, right? Like, imagine a student made a spelling mistake and you are not able to recognize it, right? As Charles has said, maybe we should invite a student. So, what is this word? Like, what did you exactly want to say, right? Or which word is this, right? Do you know the meaning of the word? So that, you are sure 100% that the student either has learned or didn't learn the word. Okay, so shall we
Next
move?
slide, please. Yes. Oh, okay. So it's also important that VKS comes in different modified formats. So if you are interested to explore the applications of different versions, here is an excellent book titled "Focus on Vocabulary" by Schmidt and Mann, 2011. So here they introduce academic words via reading and writing activities in their book. They also use this format as a pre-test and post-test to check how many of the target words in the unit were learned by the learners.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. This is an excellent book. So, and VKS was used in this book at the beginning of every chapter. There are like, they have words that need to be learned during the unit, and researchers or the authors have actually used the VKS format to assess students' knowledge, whether they've already known these words or not. And just on a related note, Dan Schmidt or Norbert Schmidt are two very famous vocabulary researchers who work at the University of Nottingham. So, I mean, you might want to check out their book as well on second language vocabulary. Okay, now it's my turn. So let's go to format number 3, which is called meaningful sentences. So what happens in this one is basically, so let's visualize the context, okay? So imagine that you've already taught, let's say, 20 new words to students. You just want to know to what extent your students have learned or mastered these words, okay? You basically want to know to what extent that your students are able to produce these words in their speaking. So one way to assess them would be that you know, you ask your students, get their cell phones, okay, get their cell phones and ask them to record or make sentences and record their sentences, spoken sentences, in their mobile phones, okay? But before you ask them to do that, you have to give them directions. So that's one way to give directions to your students, okay? You will basically say, you will pre-record a speech to your students, and you will play that pre-recorded speech in a classroom, okay? So you can say something like, turn on your recorder, do not turn your recorder off until the end of the test. You give them 5 seconds, state your name. So student will say, okay, you will now hear 5 words. So you will, out of these 20 words, you can select 5 random words that you want your students to master. And you will say, you will hear now 5 words. Each word will be read twice. After hearing the word twice, you will have 10 seconds to mentally prepare a meaningful sentence, and then 20 seconds to record your sentence before the next word is read. Your sentence may contain a different form of the word provided, okay? So you're basically giving a chance for your students to say anything about the word they have learned. They can either say the definition, or they give an example sentence, or explain that word, okay? So to be more specific, you will basically record this one by one. So you can say something like, the first word is theory. You have 10 seconds to prepare a meaningful sentence. You now have 20 seconds to state your sentence. So basically, after you say theory, you can give a piece of paper to your student. Your student can make a note on a piece of paper. After 10 seconds, you can give your students 20 seconds so that they are able to record their sentence on either a digital recorder or a cell phone. Okay, so that's what we can do. How about if we just practice a little bit? Okay, are you guys ready? I want 2 or 3 volunteers. Okay, so now let's do it. The second word is unique. Unique. You have 10 seconds to prepare a meaningful sentence. So let me give you 10 seconds. You now have 20 seconds to state your sentence. So do we have any volunteers? Unmute yourself and you can, unmute yourself and you guys can talk, please. So Zebo says, this is a unique opportunity to learn. Okay.
Getting local English speaker in our webinar is unique opportunity to know that we can reach so kind of level of English. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, as you can see, so once the students record it, right? Once the students record their sentences, they can actually text message this sentence to you guys, or they can email it to you guys. So, and there are a couple of good things about this. So it was my unique chance for obtain my goals. Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Shkura. So now here's the thing, right? So again, right? Assessing students' productive vocabulary can be tricky. For example, for the word dictionary, right? What if a student says a dictionary is a book? I don't think it's an acceptable sentence, right? Because we want to know more about the student's knowledge about these words, right? Or how about a dictionary has useful information about words? I can check word definitions and example sentences in a dictionary. So this seems to be I can say from the sentence that the student knows what dictionary is, and student is able to use this word in a sentence, right? Or sentence number 3, we have a lot of dictionaries in the classroom and we use them a lot while reading a new text, right? So this seems, student 2 and student 3, I think, did a good job in giving definitions or telling something about the words, while student number 1, it's too simple, it's too short, right? So I don't think it's an acceptable answer. I understand that it also depends on the student's proficiency, but if you want to do meaningful sentences, remember, right, students have 20-second pause to say something about the word. So preferably they shouldn't stop. They have to keep talking about this word so that they give full information about the word. Now, scoring, right? Again, 1 point can be given for the successful, meaningful sentences. and 0 point for unsuccessful sentences. And also depends like what you want to do. Like maybe as a teacher, you want to pay attention to the pronunciation of the word, right? Or the coherence, like does the sentence sound make sense to you or not? Intelligible, right? Like some students usually talk a lot, but you might not know what they're talking actually about, right? So that's why it's also very important, like to take these variables into account. Or you can also use this rubric. So this rubric was put together by my colleague, Wendy McFeely, who's right now in Egypt. And I actually used it in our teaching in Arizona. So you can use this simple rubric, right? You have a word here, and you have score here, and teacher comments, right? So after you assess students' meaningful sentences, you can fill in this chart and give it to students, which obviously is a positive washback, right? Because you're not just assessing students' meaningful sentences, but you're also talking afterwards, after the students submit their sentences to you. So due to time limitations, I just want to skip this. So as you can see, meaningful sentences, right, encourage students to demonstrate their vocabulary knowledge. And you use the words that you taught in class, right? So it's also great formative assessment. Maybe, we actually used meaningful sentences in Arizona before students took their achievement test. We used it for formative assessment purposes. Like before students took their achievement test, we want to make sure that students have mastered these words. And we want to give them feedback so that they are better prepared for their achievement test, which was actually high-stake test. So cell phone or voice recorders are required. And because cell phones or voice recorders are required, maybe in terms of practicality, maybe it's not really high because, right, you have to give your phone number to your students, or students have to bring voice recorders. And once you have voice recorders, you have to convert all the files to the computer, and you have to listen to the students' speeches one by one. Imagine you have like 20 students, right? It's obviously it's going to take you a lot of time. So even though it's very authentic and the valid way of assessing students' productive vocabulary, but in terms of practicality, it's a little bit low, right? So let me see. So if there are any questions. Useful rubric, great. Okay, so let's move on. So the last but not least, one more thing is test format number 4. It's related to collocations, right? We know that collocations is a group of words that occur together, right? One of the examples I give over and over again is that strong rain, heavy rain, strong wind, right? Can we say heavy wind, strong rain? No, even though it's coherent and clear to native speakers, but the right way to say it would be heavy rain and strong wind, right? The group of words that occur together. And here's what I want you guys to do. Can you guys please read this short text? This text was written, this short passage was written by a student, and the student was supposed to talk about it like, whether it's a good thing to study in a foreign country or not. So this is an excerpt from their passage. So can you please read this passage and identify 4 collocation errors? Maybe there are more errors, I don't know, but at least Shazes and I have selected 4 collocation errors, Can you guys select 4 collocation errors in this text? And you guys can use it in a chat, or you guys just unmute yourself and talk to us. Have the chance. No, I think. Okay. Solve a decision. You are right. Solve a decision. Okay. Nice impact, Alisher. Thank you. Zeba. Thank you. Nice impact, Umida. Yeah. Dilnoza, that's starting. I think that's fine. Starting. Fantastic role. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much, colleagues. Rahmat Etkanilige. Halimapa Topatara. Oh, the last but not least, Dilnoza Jekhanova said arrange. Exactly, arrange students, right? Let me just, right? These are the errors, right? Solve a decision, right? Here. We sort of can understand what the student wants to say, right? Probably make a decision, right? And also fantastic role, right? Fantastic, like, do you remember like we talked about it, formal, informal, right? Like sometimes, you know, like for example, if you're in a formal situation, right, you have to obviously change your register, right? It doesn't matter whether you're talking to the Uzbek president or the US president, right? When you talk to the president, you have to change your formality, right? While I'm talking to my kids, right, I have to change my register totally, right? So, and also it depends, you know, what kind of a relationship you've got. But yeah, you're right. Fantastic role doesn't make sense. It's not a good collocation. Or nice impact, right? Nice. I mean, you know, a student is writing an academic text, and there is a word nice, right? So it sort of doesn't really make sense, right? Doesn't click. Or arrange a student's future. And probably we assume that the student probably has used a Google Translate for this, right? So, well, so one way to assess students' productive vocabulary would be, you know, you basically give a passage to students that has some, let's say, incorrect words, incorrect usage of words, especially in the area of collocations, and you highlight them to students, okay? You highlight it to students, something like this. If you want, you can also number this, okay? So number this, and you can also bold the word that needs to be replaced, okay? So let's say here, a student needs to replace the word solve, here, fantastic, and here, nice. And you basically have your students, you can give them a form like this, okay? You can give them a form like this and tell them, right? So please write down a revised collocation here, revised collocation here, and the students have to write it down. And if you want, you can have your students use a dictionary. If you want, not really. So it's really up to you. If you want, you can have your students give number of options. Okay, you can say, you know, give as many options as you can. And obviously, one of the tricky things about collocations is that some of them, you know, sometimes there is only one option, while in some other contexts there are more than one options, right? So, you know, one good thing about this is that you're assessing collocations in a context-dependent format, right? In other words, students have this passage, they're full of information. So, you know, they have to write a specific word, and encourage students to use collocation resources, right? Whether it's a dictionary or some other sources, or bilingual dictionary, some of you said. And it is difficult to score again, right? Because you have to look at formality, informality, spelling versus usage, right? And especially if you're teaching a writing course, I think this is a great, great activity, right? If you're teaching a writing course. Shazas, now
Yes.
the last but not least, go ahead.
Please. Okay, thank you. So in this section, it describes the productive version of the vocabulary levels test that's recommended for teachers to learn how many words your students recognize in each frequency level. For example, how many words do they know from 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, or 5,000 frequency levels, right? So, and here, Poll Nation provides a detailed overview of popular frequency lists, including vocabulary levels test. In his book titled, also he has a book on this, and it's called Learning Vocabulary in Another Language, right?
Yes.
And also, this was originally designed to measure learners' receptive vocabulary size.
This one.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Loeffler and Nation modified the test format and introduced the productive version of the test. And it's entitled Vocabulary Levels Test Productive. Right, Ludovic?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, receptive, receptive, I think it's everything is clear. Let's move to productive vocabulary here. So the students are provided with the sentences, and also please pay attention that when we give a word, we have the first letters are given to them, right?
Or first three letters.
Yes, we can say that 3 letters. So the students have to supply with the last ones, right? So to find a word, for example, let's say the dress you are wearing is lovely. Or in the second example, we can say she wanders aimlessly in the streets. So here the students are producing, but we also can say that this is not fully productive vocabulary as far as the students are given the first 3 letters. as RUBRIC mentioned, that this we can say that this is semi-productive vocabulary. All
Yeah,
right?
I think we made a mistake here, no? Shouldn't it be lovely?
Yes.
Yes, sorry.
So it's just technical problems, you know.
You see, vocabulary is tricky.
Yes, vocabulary is tricky. And probably, you know, we also made it, you know, probably the participants paid attention, you know, and excellent participants just paid
Yes.
attention.
No, I was just reading it carefully. It's like, no, something doesn't sound right, you know. Oh, Elmurad already said lovely. Thank you, Elmurad. Okay.
Like something is missing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you were testing participants' vocabulary.
No, we were not testing at all. But we should have said that.
Yes, well,
Yes.
So
you
good.
got 1 point. Elmurad, you got 1 point.
Yeah, Elmurad, one. Yeah, you're right.
1 point. And probably on the next slide, Elmurad will get all the points if he tries. Right? So we can also say that vocabulary levels test is maybe like you can do it by computer-based or pencil and paper. It's also contribute to this vocabulary. The first 2 or 3 letters are given, are shown of the word. And you can also use it for diagnostic or placement purposes.
Yeah.
Here.
So
yes.
Go ahead, Charles. Sorry.
So this is a controlled product vocabulary format because while taking the test, learners are not just producing random words. Instead, they're prompted to supply letters that generate a word that is semantically appropriate in a meaningful sentence context, right?
Yeah, so as you can see here.
You can, yes.
Go ahead, Charles.
So you can also use this format to integrate the previously learned words into their own tests. As suggested, as we said earlier, the sentences in the test can be adapted either from the course textbooks or just learn dictionaries. So here we also have scoring. As we mentioned again, they can also get 0 for their wrong answers and 1 for their correct answers. So sometimes spelling errors may be, you know, penalized. It really depends on you or on your grading policy.
Yeah, so and we actually, this screenshot is from Complete Lexical Tutor, right? Last time I think Ed Kinnick also showed this, right, to do a different analysis. So even though this website doesn't really look appealing, but you know, it has all sorts of tests, right? So version A, version B, version C. So you guys can play with it, okay? So I'll send this. We'll send this PowerPoint to Nodrope. So and over there we actually hyperlinked, okay? So how can I get back to? So it's here. So thank you, Charles. So now important takeaways, right? Productive vocabulary. As you can see, productive vocabulary test formats are messy. One of the reasons they're messy is that because you have to make a decision, right? What you want to focus on. Will you focus on the meaning or the spelling or the definition or the intelligibility of the sentences? Do you want to make it as a written or spoken? So that's why it's really messy to assess students' productive vocabulary. Also, you can, but at the same time, you can use productive vocabulary as a formative assessment. So you want to teach, check, give feedback, and move on, right? So also, as you can see, Bruno, you also have to take into account the test usefulness when you select the format. Okay, for example, meaningful sentence. Maybe that's the best way to assess students' speaking vocabulary, right? However, productive vocabulary, but it might take a lot of time to use that format, right? Imagine you have 30 students and each student needs to create sentences for 5 sentences, for 5 words, and each should record it on their phone and should send it to via Telegram. You have to record it and listen to them and grade them, right? Obviously, it's going to take a lot of time. So you really have to make these decisions. And I mean, as teachers, we always have to make a decision, right? And that's one of them. But the last but not least is that context dependent and context independent. So one of the good things about productive vocabulary, especially when you assess it, is there is always sentence involved, right? Whether you're assessing students' collocations, whether it's meaningful sentences, whether fill in the gap, there is always sentences involved. And we know that, you know, whether we speak or write, we don't just use individual words. We actually produce sentences. So that's why assessing productive vocabulary, I think, is a valid way to assess students' vocabulary, because there is a context, and students need to take the context into account to produce the word or to demonstrate their knowledge of the target words. So, so that's one of the good things about productive vocabulary. And so this is some of the literature references. So, I mean, we could have easily, you know, listed 50 references, but we decided not to do that. We decided to just integrate the ones that are useful, okay? So as I told you guys earlier, so this is Reed, and it's the very famous researcher in the area of vocabulary assessment. And Norbert Schmidt's book, Researching Vocabulary, is an excellent book if you're doing research in this area. And in general, if you're interested in vocabulary, you must have this book by Nation, Paul Nation. You must have this book. And please, if you get it, get the second edition, okay? This was initially published in 2001 and, no, 1991, then revised in 2001, and then you know, just second edition came out. Last but not least, there is this book by Avril Coxhead, New Ways in Teaching Vocabulary by TESOL Press. So it has a collection of really good resources on how you can integrate vocabulary into your teaching, or it also has hands-on suggestions how teachers can use vocabulary in their classroom. And the example that you saw on meaningful sentences was published actually in this book. And also other test formats, Charles and I put together other test formats that are in vocabulary, productive vocabulary in nature. So once you guys get this PPT, you will have access to these test formats. And we didn't give any definitions, anything. You will just see like test format 1, test format 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you will see a variety of test formats which can help you assess your students' productive vocabulary. Okay. So I'll send this PPT through Mentor Hub, so and also send it to Nodropa. So I hope you guys will have access to this variety of resources. And thank you again. Charles, do you want to say something?
Thank you very much. Yes, I would like just to thank Nodropa for giving us such a brilliant chance, you know, to share with our ideas with our participants. Also, thank you very much goes to all of our participants. So we wish you tremendous success in your future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. So now, any questions? If you have questions, you can either put in the chat, or you can also unmute yourself and ask your questions. So Nilufar Jamaluddinova said, what topics are planned to present? I think Nodropa and I were thinking about it maybe sometime towards the end of May, Akmal Akbarov, and I will give a talk about podcasts, using podcasts in language learning. So.
Great. Okay, I think no questions. Yes. Yeah, if you're interested in any of the topics, please write in Mentor Hub. So then we'll try to recruit our speakers, request them to make presentations on that topic, okay? But meanwhile, yes, I am negotiating with some speakers and we'll see how it goes, okay? I'll announce all the webinars in the group. Yes. Yeah. If there are no questions, thank you so much, guys. Ulubek and Shazes. The pleasure is all ours. Yes, that was really, I think it was very productive webinar on productive vocabulary, right?
You see?
And yes, and thanks for the goodie bags, right? So we're gonna have some presents, the PPT and the even the Google Docs with some sample test, right? As far
Yes,
as I
exactly.
understand.
Yeah, I'll send the Google Docs file, also the PPT, and also if you have questions, like let's use the Mentor Hub as a platform, to discuss some of these things.
Yes. Thank you so much, guys. Yes.
Thank you,
Have a
Nadrapa.
good have a good night, or have a good day,
or have a good
wherever you are.
iftar.
Yes, have a good iftar. Yes. Okay. Thanks
Okay,
for coming.
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.